I never imagined the quiet of my mountain cabin would be broken by gunfire. But on that bitter Thursday evening, 3 sharp reports ripped through the trees and everything changed in an instant. My name is David Ross. Off the clock that night, I was supposed to be just a husband and grandson enjoying a little peace. In another life, I wear a uniform. I'm a lieutenant commander on one of the state's top SWAT teams. But this was my home, not a battlefield. Elena was in the kitchen baking. Grandpa Joe sat on the porch with his favorite tea, wrapped in his worn flannel. I was out back clearing dead brush, thinking about nothing more dangerous than splitting wood, when the shots started. The shooter wasn't a stranger, a burglar, or some gang kid. It was Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, striding up my driveway in a pink robe, a revolver in her hand like she belonged in a cheap Western. She was yelling something about violations. The words made no sense against the crack of gunfire. The first round tore through the kitchen window. Elena's scream hit me harder than the glass. The second round struck Grandpa Joe in the shoulder. He slumped in his rocking chair, confusion and pain etching his face. The third round missed by inches. I dove forth, a cover, and somewhere in that second, something snapped. I wasn't just a husband or a bystander anymore. I was a protector. I hauled myself behind the stacked firewood and keyed my emergency radio with one hand. Echo 01, officer down. Level red. That code was all it took. The team knew exactly what it meant. Within minutes, SWAT would be inbound. Karen, however, didn't realize who she had chosen to terrorize. She paced the porch like a deluded monarch, waving her pistol and shouting about mailbox paint and lawn height as if citation tags justified bloodshed. Her hair was wild, her face flushed with rage, hers like someone untethered from reality. I'd seen hardened criminals with more composure. Inside, Elena was crawling, bleeding but coherent, pressed behind the island where the bullet had shattered her phone. Grandpa Joe lay on the porch bench, blood dark on his sweater, whispering my name. I needed time, a few minutes, and enough control to keep them alive until my team arrived. I slipped into the underground shed to the emergency locker I kept for extremes. Vest, sidearm, tactical light, comms, and the direct uplink that very few civilians ever get. Echo 01 registered on the other end almost instantly. SWAT en route. 2 minutes out. Hold tight. Orders incoming, came the calm voice. I peered through the trees and watched a black chopper carve the dusk sky. My squad doesn't wait for red tape when people are being shot at. I reported the situation. Armed subject unstable, shots fired, civilians hit. Green light? I asked, steady. Green light confirmed. Permission to engage, they answered. I looked at Elena and Grandpa Joe, then back at the collapsing scene on my porch. Karen had reached into a glittery pink purse and pulled out a second gun, tipping a flower pot over as if staging a scene from a madness-fueled play. She shrieked that we were criminals, that she was protecting the community. This had stopped being petty HOA tyranny. It was plainly terror. I moved low along the tree line to the generator and waited, breathing like the forest. Martinez, one of my team, descended through the trees like a shadow. 2 others stacked on the gravel behind her SUV. I gave the signal, a sharp flashlight blink. Karen turned, and that moment sealed her fate. Freeze! Martinez barked. She fired a frantic, uncontrolled shot. That single mistake cost her control. A Bravo team mark sliced the revolver from her hand, and it spun away, metal clattering like a child's toy. She crumpled, screaming and pleading about rights and community service. We secured her quickly. Then I ran to Elena. Her pulse was weak, but when she saw me, her face eased and she managed a small, bruised smile. Grandpa Joe moaned my name, eyes glassy but alive. The chaos around us began to close in with disciplined, surgical force. The storm I helped train for had come to my doorstep, and we were the ones who finally held the line. Grandpa Joe groaned and managed a crooked grin. Took you long enough, soldier. I squeezed their hands and let my gaze linger on the ruined shell of what had been our quiet home. This isn't over, I told them. Karen has lawyers. She has influence. She isn't done fighting, and neither am I. Sirens dwindled into the timber as the chopper lifted away. Karen was led from my property in cuffs, howling about being persecuted by the government and claiming she'd only ever tried to keep the neighborhood safe. Paramedics worked fast. Elena and Grandpa Joe would live, but both would carry the night with them forever. For most people, a story like this would end with cuffs and headlines. Not Karen. Money and connections let her twist the narrative. By morning, her lawyer had already filed a formal complaint accusing me of excessive force and unlawful surveillance, a tidy attempt to flip victim and defender. What she didn't know was that my cabin wasn't merely a refuge. It doubled as a field test. Prototype body cams, motion sensors, synced drone feeds, every angle of the porch, the kitchen, the yard, recorded in full HD with time-stamped logs. I handed the footage to Internal Affairs before her team could craft a smear. Every shot she fired, every scream about mailbox colors while Elena bled, every furious, deluded face was on tape. Watching the review board go from clinical to visibly shaken was its own vindication. Still, politics is a blunt instrument. A lawsuit like this backed by HOA money could spiral, one city official murmured. We need to be careful. The chief called me in and behind closed doors told me I was being placed on temporary leave pending an investigation. I looked him dead in the eye. You're sidelining me for protecting my family? He offered no answer, and only the practiced silence of men who'd rather not provoke lawsuits. I didn't wait for permission. That night, I did something the brass never expected. I went public, not as a commander, but as a husband and citizen. I hosted a live stream and told everything. The timeline, the shots, the audio, the raw clips of Karen with air revolver and the moment she hit my wife. The video went viral. 2 million views in under 48 hours. Outrage followed. Sponsors dropped Karen. Her defense team scrambled. Internal HOA messages leaked. Other board members distanced themselves, saying they'd been misled. The narrative flipped. Karen the enforcer became Karen the domestic threat. But she still had one desperate card to play. 3 days after her arrest, she escaped custody. She faked a medical episode during transfer, feigned vertigo, was taken to a hospital, and vanished during a restroom stop. Somehow she shed cuffs, swapped into scrubs, and walked out the staff exit like somebody with privilege. Before dawn, my phone buzzed. Martinez's voice was tight. She's gone, sir. We think she's coming back. I stood in the living room 2 days later, walls still pocked with holes and floorboards stained where we hadn't yet scrubbed out blood. Elena had just returned from the hospital. Grandpa Joe was in the recliner, arm in a sling. Karen, armed and unhinged, was loose somewhere out there. I didn't wait on bureaucracy a second time. I grabbed my vest, my sidearm, the thermal drone, and a body cam and activated Operation Red Shield, a hostage recovery. Threat neutralization plan I'd drawn up for just this kind of nightmare. The drone swept the perimeter. For a long, tense minute, there was nothing. Then a ping. Motion on the east tree line. Visual confirmed. A woman in a robe dragging something wrapped in plastic and clutching a fuel can. I spoke into my earpiece. Zone breach confirmed. Silent protocol. Martinez and Bravo were en route, but seeing her there made me move. I pushed low through the woods, every step deliberate, heart pounding the old rhythm of tactical insertion. She was back on the porch, muttering to herself about mailbox paint. No yelling this time, only bitter, breathy whispers. She held a lighter in one hand and the can in the other, eyes glazed. I stepped out of the shadow. "Drop it, Karen," I said, voice calm. She spun, eyes bloodshot, and screamed about being humiliated, about losing her HOA badge. "You shot my wife," I said, steady. "You're finished." My finger steadied on the trigger, but I wanted her alive. Exposure matters more than a clean kill when you need the world to see the whole truth. Bravo slid in behind me. Martinez closed in and tackled her before she could strike the lighter. This time, there was no theatrical tantrum, only ragged sobbing and the heavy sound of someone finally broken. They cuffed her properly. There were no deals, no influence to hide behind. I looked at Elena, then Grandpa Joe, and then up to the drone still hovering like an unmanned witness. "I didn't start this war," I told the camera that had recorded it all, but I ended it. The court later sentenced Karen Whitmore to 30 years for attempted murder, assault, arson, and felony escape. I was reinstated, given a commendation by the mayor, and the story ran on national news. None of that mattered as much as the two hands clutched in mine. The family I'd fought to keep. If you thought that was intense, trust me, it only scratches the surface. There are more HOA horror stories out there, stranger and darker than you'd expect. If this had you on the edge of your seat, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone like Karen showed up at your door with a gun?